Well. It's Tuesday, October 1st. It's 7 p.m. Eastern Time. I'm Bob Harris. This is the Audible channel, Football Guys on YouTube. It's time to go on the hot seat. But first, the usual assortment of nonsense. Footballguys.com is the website. I appreciate you joining me here every Tuesday on the hot seat. It's a great show. Always have a great guest on, maybe even one today. Also on Saturdays at 11 a.m. Eastern Time for the Ask Me Anything live streams. We chop up some lineup talk, chop it all up. It's a great time. You hit the subscribe button and the notification bell, do all that kind of YouTube stuff, and like us or not. And by us, I mean my good friend Eric Romoff, from Pros with Joe's. Now with Fantasy Alarm. Do tell, and by the way, you find him on X at Fantasy Nav, as everybody knows. Do tell us what you got going on, Eric.
Yeah, I have a problem saying no to things. So I have a lot of things going on. All of this rolls into my Twitter page, like you mentioned, at Fantasy Nav. But yeah, this year I am breaking down every single wide receiver cornerback matchup every single week. It's about 6,000 words that I'm writing out there. So if you want to know which guys you should, which ones you should fade in DFS, which kind of fringy flex guys are the ones that you should be inserting into your lineup, that is a great resource. I'm also writing an injury update for drroto.com, doing a bit of charting over at FTN as well. So generally speaking, just trying to keep all the plates spinning, right?
Yep. As you've been doing since I've known you, our days together at Football Diehard. So great to have you on here. And we're going to talk a little free agent, answer some questions, say hi to everybody. Hi, Andrea. Yay, Brad remembered it's me and not him, or not. No Cecil, no Sig on this show. I know, like, I look a little Siggy and he looks a little Cecilish, but no, it's just us. It's just us. So, Brad, welcome aboard. Glad you still made it, even if it's not Cecil and Sig. They're around. You'll see plenty of them. We're going to talk the usual free agents, week 5 stuff going on. And there's a lot going on. And there's some obvious targets here. One thing I wanted to hit on, just the top of the news, if you didn't catch it today, the Devante Adams story situation is evolving quickly. It went from Vinny Bonsignor reporting early today that the Raiders might be willing to see what other teams are interested in for trades. And then Devante was up. Well, it started last night when Fabiano said something on SI and Antonio Pierce liked it. Last night, Fabiano says, and he's taking credit for all this, as you well know. He says, I could show you. I'll show you him taking credit for it. But anyway, it started, the tweet was basically, I think that we may have seen Devante Adams play his last snap as a Raider. Well, maybe so. But then Antonio Pierce liked that on his Instagram. Well, that's not productive. So then this morning, Vinny Bonsignor, the Las Vegas Review-Journal, started discussing it and saying, hey, this, sources say that they might be willing to move on or see what they can get for him. Then it went to Adams was on Up and Adams with Kay Adams. A lot of Adams thing going on. My old friend Kay back from the early Sirius days. And basically, he said, yeah, it's kind of weird that he said all this. I don't know what's going on. And then at the end of the interview, it was like Kay Adams said, I hope you talk to your coach. And Adams said, so do I. Well, apparently he did. And he said, please trade me. And now they're looking for a second-round pick and some other pieces. The teams that can afford to do this, there's only a handful. Some of them make a lot of sense. The 49ers make sense. The Jets obviously make sense. The Commanders make sense. The Lions are also in that mix. The Cowboys, the Cardinals. There's some Detroit. There are teams that can get there. What would you think is the ideal landing spot?
Yeah, this one's tricky, right? Once the reporting was out there that he requested it, and we started seeing additional reporting about a price tag, you can start to narrow in on the landing spots that might actually fit that criteria. I know everybody wants to see him go to Kansas City. I would like to decree right here, he's not going to Kansas City. They're not going to trade him in the division. He doesn't really play the role that they have a vacancy for either, so it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. For me, I'm going to walk down narrative street here a little bit. I'll give 2 options. The one is readily apparent, the Jets, the reunion with his signal caller, Aaron Rodgers, in an offense that's kind of stuttering right now. One that he is pining for accountability, which is coded language for people who operate the way that I want to operate, which Devante Adams did pretty well for him in their time together at Green Bay. The second option that I'll offer up there is the aforementioned Dallas Cowboys, a offense that is also sputtering and one that is reeling after going quote unquote all in this offseason and making almost no changes, right? This is a very splashy way for them to announce to their fan base that they are in fact all in. They're going to try to make a run of it this year, and they have the requisite draft capital and unhinged nature of their front office to maybe pull off this kind of move.
Do we really want it to be the Jets, though? Do we really want it? Is that like, I would like it to be something way more interesting, but that is, the narrative would be fine. I would prefer the Commanders. Yeah. I'm not going to lie. I think the Commanders would be a great opportunity to add a little more high end to my guy, Jaden Daniels, but we'll see. So there's all that going on, people. There is other news. Go to thefootballguys.com. Go to the news page. Me, Cecil, Sigmund, we're all writing up news all week. Go read the news. It's fantastic. Also, get the daily update podcast every morning, 10 minutes of me and Mike Dempsey going through the news and kind of discussing the fantasy angles on that. It's like a little 10-minute daily dose of fantasy goodness to start your day. And so appreciate you listening to that. Also catch my fantasy notebook every Thursday, my polarizing players collaboration with Gary Davenport every Friday, and my in and out column on Saturday, which is variously on and off base. A little better week this week than the week before, but that's not saying much. A lot better week. That's still not saying much. Week 3 was a disaster. Week 4 much better. All right, everybody. Oh no, Zarek against a medium would like me not to ruin his Terry McLaurin shares. Look, I got Terry McLaurin shares too. But I don't think it would ruin anybody. I think there's a lot of bandwidth there, it turns out. So a lot going on. Let's look at the quarterback. We'll talk waiver wires. I see your questions out there. We'll get to those here as we work our way through some of these questions, people. So don't panic if I don't get to them. Hate to make you wait around. And there's one question right off the bat that I did want to get to. Where was it? It's, time to drop Rashee Rice. Or you can't drop him right now. I don't know that you can't. You probably can, but you should probably give it a day or two, right? Until we find out. And it might be until next week. So if you don't need that roster spot desperately to pick up one of the players we're going to discuss today, then yeah, I'm probably holding on until I find out what the actual results are. I don't think they're good. Right, Eric? I mean, this is an indefinite absence at best, but maybe not season ending.
Yeah, it's kind of bizarre that we haven't gotten definitive word yet, right? All of us Twitter doctors are watching the replays, and it seems pretty catastrophic, right? So the fact that we don't have anything definitive, albeit a very small, if minute chance, potentially opens up the window that there's some far-flung likelihood that he's not done for the season. And if you dropped him right now so you can get a defense to replace yours that's on bye, you're going to feel very, very silly. So albeit a very small likelihood, one that I'm not really willing to risk. Right.
I mean, I think anytime you're in these situations, you probably wait until you have all the information before you make decisions. Makes perfect sense, unless you're in a pressing bind. Then I think it's fair to lean into this one and say, okay, it's probably going to be a while if I really needed to make a desperation move. There are teams on bye. I don't know that you might have Detroit Lions that are important to you and your team's success. Maybe a Philadelphia Eagle or two. That's also possible. There might be a Charger. I don't think there's any Titans that you're going to worry about too much. We'll talk about that when we get to it. There might be. I had another question. Speaking of Titans, drop Ridley to pick up Brian Thomas Jr. or Wicks. Sure. I mean, I'm like the quarterback play there. It's going to be Will Levis when he is healthy enough to do it. And in the meantime, it's going to be Mason Rudolph. They have the bye this week. So, I think it's perfectly fine to drop him. There are a handful of players I'm fine dropping. I'm fine dropping Mark Andrews right now. Where are you at on that?
I am less fine dropping Mark Andrews. I am perfectly fine dropping Calvin Ridley. The amount that Calvin Ridley has produced, despite the dumpster fire that has been the Tennessee offense, is kind of mind-boggling, and it screams regression. He will not be able to do this if this offense stays the same for very long, right? So don't mind moving on from him, especially in the context of some very nice upside plays like Brian Thomas Jr. or Wicks. To your Andrews question, I mean, I understand the desire to want to drop him, but what are you replacing him with exactly, right? I'm a little bit more optimistic that we see Mark Andrews return to some form of himself, at least more frequently than we will getting streamer production at the tight end position.
I think that's possible, right? And that's the argument for him. I would rather play Taysom Hill at this point, but that's not neither here nor there. But if I needed room to find a guy on that roster who was getting all the target share and I needed Justice Hill and it was between him and Mark Andrews, I don't know. Like, I'm generally one to hold on, right? Like, I generally am, but the numbers have not been great. They're going to be super run heavy. The routes have not been good. Like, I see many out there holding too much draft capital. I get it, but at some point you've got to just acknowledge what's going on. Like I didn't feel the same way about Travis Kelce because the underlying numbers suggested that he would have a role, right? The underlying numbers here don't suggest that. They don't suggest anything like that. It's been one target a game, right? So, and 34 total passes. Maybe there's going to come a point where they have to throw the ball a bunch more. But until that happens, he's going to be sitting on your bench, people, maybe clogging up a roster spot that could be used more effectively by one of the many players we're about to talk about. That's all. That's all. I say that with zero Andros in his portfolio. There we go. These guys are still in on Ridley. It's possible there's hope, but quarterback play has been the issue. And I'm also one to not let, less than ideal quarterback play keep me from playing, but really bad offenses. I'm not digging too deep into really bad offenses.
Yeah, that's precisely my point of view, right? His production it's hard to repeat in that type of offense.
Right. So we got some more takes on this. I saw the Patriots do have the money to do this. I don't know what the point would be at this for them to do it. Adams, most larger spots, New Orleans. There's interesting. Jets, Cowboys, and Steelers. Probably not the Steelers. And agrees on a really bad offense. Let's talk about some free agents. Let's start with the quarterback position. There's a few guys that are kind of available. Like Justin Fields should not be available in any format, correct?
That is a correct statement. If he is on your wire, you ought to go out and change that.
How much would you spend on him?
It depends on need, right? If it's someone that, if I'm in a circumstance where I have, I don't know, Anthony Richardson or a guy on buy, then I wouldn't mind spending 15, 20, 22% or so to go out and acquire him. Obviously, those numbers go up a fair amount if we're talking about super flex. If it's really just, you have an open bench spot and you want to try to, keep a guy like Fields off of your wire, that's probably where you're more in like that kind of 8 to 12% range.
So if you're a Anthony Richardson investor and you did not grab Joe Flacco with the last pick of your draft, as I did, yes, I'm carrying 3 quarterbacks in many of my Richardson leagues for that reason, just because it's Richardson, right? The upside is there, but you got to mitigate the risk. But let's say you didn't. Would he be someone you would go out and grab? They're playing the Jaguars this week. Is he like worth a 1-game stopgap if you're getting for nothing? Let's say you're max. Let's say you like a max bid of maybe 5% of your fab.
I think that sounds about right. And this is one of those cases where you have to know the intention and the spirit of your league mates, right? If you are the Richardson manager, then Joe Flacco is worth the most to you, right? There shouldn't be a whole lot of competition for his services out there. But if you have someone that's keeping an eye on your roster and maybe wants to block you, right? When we're talking about these single digit bid percentages, I don't mind ratcheting it up another $1 or $2 or $3 just to make sure I get the guy that, fills a very legitimate gap in your roster in the event that Anthony Richardson is not able to play. To the core of your question, yeah, if that does come to pass and we're talking about Joe Flacco suiting up in week 5, I think he is a very, very solid fill-in, could potentially push even for that top 12 range pretty readily in this matchup.
All right, not a lot of available quarterbacks. I'm sure everyone has picked up Andy Dalton when given the opportunity. And so we'll run into running backs right now. I had advocated 2 weeks ago grabbing Kareem Hunt as opposed to Carson Steele. Sorry, Carson, we hardly knew you. It's time to move on. And it looks like Kareem Hunt's job right now. I think people should be mindful that Clyde Edwards-Helaire is eligible to return after this week. We'll see what's going on. But I do think Hunt, while he has fresh legs, might be a guy you could play for a few weeks. What's he worth to you? I'm going to give up at least 10%. And I bet there are people in leagues that are going to be way more aggressive than that, right?
Almost certainly, right? All you need to do is go back and look at the amount of money that people spent on Carson Steele a few weeks ago, and you'll get a sense of how aggressive people will be. Obviously, this is a glaring need for the Chiefs, and so whomever the flavor of the week is that might look to fill that need is going to be very popular. I would like to spend 10% or less on Kareem Hunt, But I think in order to acquire his services, you're probably closer to that 15% range, unless, as Bob and I both did, you went out and got him a week ago for pennies on the dollar.
I did.
Which might be the move right now with Clyde Edwards-Helaire. No one's talking about him. You can get him cheap and see if he takes over the job in a week or two.
Yeah, that's it. And so we'll get the wide receivers here, but the latest word on Watson is he probably won't go on IR, which suggests that he will be less than 4 weeks. So that's going to shade our Dontavian Wicks discussion here undoubtedly in a few moments. But let's work through some more running backs here because I think there are a few guys. Tank Bigsby seems to like be gaining a little momentum. And by gaining a little momentum, I mean looking way better than Travis Etienne at the moment. Like, I think it's a temporary thing. They said the shoulder was banged up for Etienne, but we've seen a lot of big speed when he's been available. Any interest in let's say 10, 15%?
I think that sounds about right if you are the ETN manager. Realistically, if you're the ETN manager, you should have had Tank Bigsby already because we like to handcuff our studs. But if you're in that circumstance, that sounds about right. Credit to Travis Etienne. He has looked horrendous throughout the course of the season. Last week, he actually looked a little bit better despite the reporting of that shoulder injury. So maybe he's just working his way through something and we see him get back to his normal self sooner rather than later. But also we are talking about a desperate franchise and a desperate coaching staff in the Jacksonville Jaguars that might just want to mix things up, right? So is there a greater than 10% chance that they decide to mix things up and feature Tank Bigsby? Yeah, probably. So I think spending that type of money makes sense.
Yeah, I'm with you there. And just going back, there's a comment out here, just is it going to be a 4-man committee when we get Clyde Edwards-Helaire back? No, it's not. It's not. It'll be like a 2-man committee for the most part, and it'll just be a different decision who the two guys are in a given week because we don't know what Clyde Edwards-Helaire is going to be, right? I mean, he's coming off it's a non-football issue, it's an off-field issue, as post-traumatic stress disorder from some kind of a self-defense issue from a few years ago. So we'll see where he's at.
Which is an interesting set of circumstances, right? Because it's not like he's working his way back from injury, right?
Right. It's
really,
been a
the
while.
only consideration for him is just conditioning. So once he gets his wind back, he should be able to play a full complement of snaps. And look, these Chiefs runners haven't exactly been inspiring out there, right? So maybe he comes in and gives them a little burst, and he becomes the sort of 1A in that 2-man rotation.
Man, I see Kansas City, a mid-offensive. We really are having a hard time. Like, Patrick Mahomes is not a starting quarterback in your fantasy league right now. He's just not.
He's right there.
Right? Like, that's where we're at.
He'll be in the mix now that the bye weeks are here.
Probably sure, so. But right? I mean, yeah, he is right on that fringe there, right there. So it's interesting. You should not be handcuffing any of your running backs. So that's losing mentality. You want your league makes handcuffs, especially their stud running backs. There's different theories on this. I mean, I'm not against this particular theory if it happens. Also, not afraid to have my own handcuffs as well. It depends on who the back is, though. As long as I don't pay the premium, right? That's the problem.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, exactly. Right. Like if you're gonna plant your flag that you ought not to waste roster spots on handcuffs, that's one thing. If you're going to do it on the other players in your league's backups, I think that's where your logic gets a little conflicted, right? If you're going to use those roster spots, you might as well have the guys that will pay off the most when you need it the most.
That makes sense to me as well. That's probably how I'm doing it. Trey Sermon might be one of those. If you were an Indianapolis Colts fan, or you like the Jonathan Taylor, seems likely. We'll see what Taylor. They say it's a mild high ankle sprain. I don't know how mild any high ankle sprain is, but it seems likely Trey Sermon and Tyler Goodson will get the role, but Trey Sermon be the primary. This is like a good week if you're the Colts backup, right? Like whether it's Flacco, whether it's Sermon. I mean, this seems like a favorable matchup.
Yeah, certainly. Right. This matchup against Jacksonville is one that we have been targeting. We will continue to target for the foreseeable future. So definitely a nice opportunity to walk into if it is in fact Trey Sermon or Joe Flacco. I would caution at least recommend that fantasy managers have a bit of a hedge on their expectation with Trey Sermon walking in, right? Not every handcuff who gets the job is Jordan Mason, right? Some of them are Cam Akers. So just because he's going to step into this opportunity doesn't mean that he is going to be an RB1 for you. Clearly, if you're the Taylor manager, he holds the most value for you. But I think he's probably going to be a bit more of a flex territory type of player if he does get the start.
Zari is playing the Bob Harris role here. I grabbed the cheap piece in the cheapskate, Tyler Goodson in KC.
Zari gets it.
Michael, we were doing the QB talk. Darnold and Murray. This is not the lineup show. That happened Saturday. This is more the waiver wire. So it's a little early in the week to be making lineup decisions for me. So circle around on Saturday. I'm here at 11 a.m. every week, and we will talk all the lineup questions you want. In the meantime, can anyone step in behind the offensive line blocking scheme? CFC is a bum. Well, I don't know that he's a bum. I know that he's not playing right now, but okay. Overpaid like Ayuk. Somebody's bitter much their gaming collection.
I think we have a member of the 49ers faithful here in the chat. I wouldn't go quite as far to call either of them bums, but yes, that scheme and circumstance is very favorable to offensive players. So it's a bit more of an even split in my book between CMC and the system.
Yeah, I'm with you there. All right, so some other running backs that people might be interested in. Antonio Gibson, the Ramondre Stevenson fumbling problems. Is there any interest there for you? It's a bad offense. Sorry, Ross.
A little bit, right? And Antonio Gibson has had somewhat of a role. He's had a non-zero type of role in this offense for all 4 games now, and you would have to think at a certain point, this fumbling issue is going to cost Ramondre Stevenson some time. I don't think we're going to be talking about a every week starter type of situation, but as we talked about with Patrick Mahomes, as we head into the bye week zone of fantasy football, there's going to be weeks where a guy who sees, a quarter, 30% of snaps and can catch a few balls out of the backfield will have value. So he's not a bad, cheap dart throw in my mind.
Jaleel McLaughlin, now that Tyler Binet no longer, or at least temporarily not in the mix, is any like I'll just confess here, Jaleel McLaughlin, one of my cheap favorites. I think there's still a role if at some point Bo Nix throws the ball more than negative yards down the field.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. This offense in general seems to be kind of stuck in the mud, so it's hard to feel excited about any of these pieces. But Jaleel McLaughlin seems to have a pretty well-defined role, and one that can remain on the field in a variety of different game scripts, right? So this is kind of the fertile grounds that you're looking for in fantasy football, and you just need the overall arrow of this offense to point up a little bit in order to be able to trust it in fantasy.
All right, no worries, Michael. We'll get there, man. Saturday's good. I'm looking forward to seeing you then. And by the way, yes, on this one, yes, I think probably eventually, like as in this week, it's just not working out for Zamir White. Another player I'm fine dropping, even though I was heavily invested. Yeah. I'm a little quicker to drop than some of you guys. I mean, like it's a sunk cost. You're going to have to get over at some point. And I guess the thing is, if it's clogging up a roster spot, if it's keeping you from getting a productive player, don't hesitate to let go of the guys you got in on, even without. What's wrong with Peyton? Use William Watson. No Watson yet. I don't know why. So some other running backs, maybe. Justice Hill, I mentioned him earlier. He looks like a real thing. He looks like he's almost be a standalone play. I think that's going a little over the top there. What would you be willing to pay for him? I'm thinking maybe 10% for me.
Yeah, I think that sounds about right. It's unfortunate that it's that high. This is the effect of his solid game coming on an island game, on the Sunday night game where everyone in the country was watching it. I would think under a normal circumstance, if that was a Sunday 1 p.m. game, you could probably get him for like 4 or 5%. But generally speaking, right, this offense, as we bemoaned with Mark Andrews, has told us very clearly that they want to operate by way of the ground game and throwing to the running backs. And although Derrick Henry did do some receiving work this week, Justice Hill is certainly the more capable receiver in that backfield. So he's going to have some PPR value. He'll have a role to play as a flex option during the course of these bye weeks in the event that Derrick Henry needs a bit of a breather or potentially is nicked up down the road. Obviously, Justice Hill has insane implied value as well.
And that little asteroid heading towards all of that is Keaton Mitchell at some point recovering to blow up the situation or not. We'll find out. Just maybe swing right past it. So let's look at the wide receivers here. I'll just run through the list real quick so we can get to them, so we still have time to get the questions. Dontavian Wicks at the top of everybody's list. How much do you take off that interest in him, knowing now that Watson is going to be a shorter term?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely reduces it to an extent. You would think at a certain point, this coaching staff would realize what they have in terms of capability on the field and ability to be effective, and err in that direction even when Christian Watson is healthy and available. But yeah, if we were looking at a minimum 4-week absence where Dontavian Wicks slots right into their 2 receiver sets as he did last week, he'd be a very, very valuable asset. Now it's a bit more speculative. I think we probably see a game or 2 where that's the case. Maybe he does enough to earn a larger role ongoing from that point. But I think you have to bring down your bidding stance a little bit just based on this recent news, which is tricky because I don't know if
not
you
everyone in your
can do
league
that
might see
and
it that
still
way.
acquire him. Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Right. There might be, and I probably have enough shares of him that I drafted that I don't need to pick any up. I do have a lot of shares of Watson. I'm way happier with those 9th round shares of Jameson Williams right now than I am with Watson. I'm working with those. Wan'Dale Robinson getting a big target share for the Giants. Xavier Leggett, there's a lot of talk in the chat about this. And Josh Downs as well. Wan'Dale Robinson's getting a monster target share. It's him and Malik Neighbors and almost nobody else. So I do think he's a viable volume kind of pick, Eric, for the right price, maybe 15%, maybe up to 20% of your fab. If you're in a pinch at wide receiver, the role seems robust enough there. Xavier Leggett coming off pretty good game. Seems like he's ahead of Jonathan Mingo, who's running more routes, but not getting the targets. So with Adam Thielen out, he's in play for me for probably 10 to 15% of your budget. Downs is an interesting one in Indy. I talked to James Boyd from The Athletic as we went into the season, and his view was Downs would catch as many passes this year as Michael Pittman. I didn't know he meant that Michael Pittman wouldn't catch as many as we hoped, but and that seems like it could be turning. So we'll see what's going on with him. Jalen Polk's on the list too. Jordan Whittington and Tutu Atwell, I would say. Juju, maybe. Josh Palmer, maybe. Trey Tucker for sure if they're moving on from Adams. What do you think?
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting names in the wide receiver ranks this week. Wan'Dale Robinson is probably the safest of the lot, right? He is currently 5th in the league with 37 targets, and he is, very much so the reliable underneath option in this offense, and an offense that should be in a lot of passing scripts, right? So definitely feel pretty good going heavy on Wan'Dale Robinson. Just the upside is obviously capped as long as Neighbors is out there. Beyond that, you're doing a lot of speculating, right? You're going to have to pay a bit more for Trey Tucker than you ought to, just in light of the Devante Adams news dropping earlier today. Xavier Leggett is, you're buying him high. And while I am very bullish on him as a prospect overall, we also have to keep in mind we're talking about ostensibly a 1-game sample size, right? So proceed with caution there. And then everyone else, I would say, is really a bit more speculative in nature, right? Josh Downs, I think his value is a bit more tied to Joe Flacco because Anthony Richardson has shown us that he can't really complete short and intermediate passes.
Look, man, I'm not here for the Anthony Richardson slander.
Okay, we'll leave it there. But open question as to how involved Downs will be when Richardson is under center. Polk saw some decent targets. Jordan Whittington might be one of my favorite targets here because in terms of his role, the way that they're utilizing him, he is clearly the lead receiving option for the Rams, but he just didn't have the productivity that would indicate that this week. So you can probably get him on the cheap. And Juju's kind of interesting as well, right? We talked about it with Devante Adams and the prospect of going to the Chiefs earlier. Devante Adams doesn't play the role that they're looking to fill, right? He wouldn't step into Rashee Rice's role. That's something that Juju Smith-Schuster can do. So no one's really buzzing about Juju right now. You might be able to get that slot receiver role on the cheap in Kansas City by targeting him.
All right, if you're just tuning in, I'm Bob Harris from Football Guys. Hi, how are you? Damn glad to meet you. This is Eric Romoff, my friend from Fantasy Alarm, In Between Media, Dr. Roto, FTN, You name it, he's there and now here with me as well. We're hanging out for about another half hour. We'll do some questions right now, then we'll get to the tight ends, or let's just do the tight ends, then get to the questions, because there aren't a lot of tight ends like floating around out there. Tucker Kraft seems to be the apple of everybody's eye. And he is getting all the workload there. And it's very little Luke Musgrave, but they're both still there. How big of a concern is that for you if you're out there looking for a tight end?
Yeah, well, this is kind of my point embodied when we were talking about Mark Andrews earlier, right? You let someone like that go, and what are you turning to? You're turning to the realities of streaming tight ends in 2024, which is a pretty brutal reality to navigate. Tucker Kraft did phenomenal last week, right? You got a bit more opportunity, in light of Christian Watson heading out the field and really just taking advantage of the matchup they had in particular. But also there's a non-zero chance that this time next week, we're talking about how Tucker Kraft saw one target and didn't haul it in, and now he's on the cut list, right? Of these tight ends that are widely available, I feel like Cade Otton's probably the most secure in his role, right? Not the greatest floor, but certainly the most stable of this lot. And even he is not immune to the ebbs and flows of playing tight end in 2024. So, if you're streaming at the position, you're on the merry-go-round and hoping that one of them sticks. Of this grouping, I mean, Kraft, you can make the most defendable argument that Kraft will be able to establish a more projectable role in this offense, although it's still very much so a speculative statement to make at this point.
Yeah, so we've also got Cade Otton and Eric all on our list. Any interest in them? Which one of those guys would you pick up after you drop Mark Andrews?
Oh man,
I'm just kidding.
The implication that I'm dropping Mark Andrews is hard for me to swallow. I mean, I guess of those three, I'm probably going with Tucker Kraft, right? He is the one that I think we can see him emerge into a role that's large enough to at least separate him from the kind of streaming pack, right? Cade Otton is probably a little bit safer, but I mean, you're talking 3 for 30 pretty regularly. So a lot of it depends on what you need. If Mark Andrews got you 4 points every week, would that have put you over the line to winning some of your matchups? That's the case. Maybe go towards Cade Otton. If you're looking for someone who's got a bit more upside, I would err on the side of Kraft.
All right, we'll get into some questions here, and there are plenty of them. We see your comments as well. I think my argument to drop Andrews, we'll discuss maybe a little bit more. And like, it's just, maybe just being like, obviously it depends on where your team's at, right? Like, I'm not just saying just drop him, right? But if you're in a situation where you're like 0-4, you have a spot on your roster that needs to be filled with a productive player, and there's a productive player out there, even a short-term rental, I think you can make an argument for it. But that's the argument for it. Like, ideally, I don't have to drop anyone I drafted because I'm never wrong. Everybody turns into the thing I wanted, including Mark Andrews. I was talking about this with Matt Waldman the other day on one of our podcasts, which I can't say the name of without apologizing to Joe for the rest of my life. So check it out at Matt Waldman's RSP feed. But like, the whole notion is of being right and wrong. They're temporary conditions, right? They're not permanent conditions. Right now, I am wrong on Andrews. I'm wrong on Anthony Richardson. I'm wrong on a lot of Zamir White. I'm right on a lot of Malik Neighbors. There's players that I nailed. I have to be aware these aren't permanent conditions, right, Eric? There's a shifting evolution. We see it every year, especially through the course of September. And so I'm not against the notion that Mark Andrews is going to turn back into Mark Andrews. But to me, the number of things that have to happen for him to do that, it's a pretty high bar. So that's my only argument there, and we'll get off it now. I've done enough defending my position, and I totally agree. Like, if I can, I'd rather keep Mark Andrews until he turns back into Mark Andrews. So there.
Yeah. For me, it's less about the likelihood of him turning back into Mark Andrews and more about the realities of your alternatives, right? What are you dropping Mark Andrews for? Do you have a likelihood of getting better than that out of a slightly improved Mark Andrews in the near future is the calculus that I'm trying to do.
Right. And I think, I just think that there's a point in the year where we've got to realize the happy stories we told ourselves all off season, the entire year. So we would draft somebody in the spot over somebody else. I mean, even if they were, fairly easy decisions, you've got to be ready to divorce yourself from the emotion that went into all that
100%.
and make smart decisions. And sometimes, like I try not to do anything based on emotion, because every time I do that, it's a horrible decision, except for my lovely fiance Stan. That was an emotional decision. It was really worked out well. But other than that, things I do based on emotion often end up not working well. So we've got to sit here and watch and try to assess what the possibilities are for why are we wrong? What's going on? Like with Zamir White, what's going wrong? What has been wrong? Well, he's not good. The blocking is not good. The game scripts aren't working for him. Alexander Madison has been better than expected. The workload that we saw, the volume that we anticipated, that was why I drafted him. I'm chasing volume. Just hasn't been there. And then the times it's come close, the production hasn't been there. So, I mean, at some point you've got to just say, hey, this is not working. I need to find something that is. Here's the thing, though. Here's the thing, Mr. Nice Guy. Mr. Nice Guy. I didn't want to drop Kelsey. I argued against it. And I explained that. Maybe you just tuned in. But the underlying numbers, the snap share, the route participation, the targets, where the targets were, the red zone targets. He's at the top of the team or first or second in all those categories on the Chiefs. Mark Andrews isn't even on the map, guys. It's been one target apiece each of the last 2 games. I think he only ran a route on 33% of the plays. I mean, it's like it's not been good, right? He's like a glorified offensive tackle right now. So, I'll let this argument go, but, it's not like I'm just making this up out of whole cloth. There are numbers there that suggest that, that it's going to take a bigger turnaround than it would for Kelsey. So, definitely not looking.
It's not isolated onto Andrews, right? This offense as a whole, in that Sunday night game of the Ravens, 427 yards of total offense, 358 either came by way of a carry or throwing to a running back, right? For however much we want to bemoan the mid nature of the Kansas City offense, they're still throwing the ball at a clip that is much higher than the Ravens.
Right. And this is a very good point, because it's the point I was making. It's very, very hard to admit we're wrong and move on. And I think the people who end up winning titles are the people who are ready to bail on the narrative that they created, to realize that the happy story they told themselves doesn't have a happy ending or isn't heading for a happy ending. And look, things can change, right? Like we've seen it. I can go back to, I've used this example before, but 2020, middle of the season for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Tom Brady could not complete a deep pass, could not complete a pass of 20 yards. Everyone thought it was over for him. By the end of that season, he was the best deep passer in all the NFL. So I get it. Every year is an evolution and there are things that are changing. I just don't want to get caught up in a grinder of, hey, I told myself this player was going to be something and ignore the fact that he's not, and ignore the underlying numbers as well. So now that I've created that controversy there, that's part of it, Michael. That's 100%.
Yeah.
And yes, I think Derrick Henry, one of the guys I was right about. I think I saw that coming, Zari. Come on now. So we'll get to some questions here. Let's go. Trade Xavier Worthy for DJ Moore.
Man, I don't think I'm going there quite yet. He's sort of the last man standing in this Kansas City offense, but I don't think that we're going to see a world where all of the Rashee Rice volume goes to Xavier Worthy's direction. And I'm still a bit bullish on the trajectory of this Bears offense. It's one that throws the ball a lot. We're seeing Caleb Williams get into a better and better rapport with his wide receivers. I project that to continue. So I think you're selling a little low on DJ Moore here for me.
I would agree with that. And expecting the Chiefs they need a high volume asset there to complement Travis Kelce. I don't know that Xavier Worthy will ever be that, but man, there are routes that Xavier Worthy cannot be stopped on. And so definitely a fine play, but not in place of Moore. And I think I'm with you on the trajectory of the offense. Sorry, Killa, not really doing the starters just yet. It's a little early for that, but if you're asking me right now, Rashad White on Thursday night, and then we'll get to the rest on Saturday. That's a standard thing too. That takes away the Rashad White angle that I was looking for. Another start-sit question. We'll get to those on Saturday. Here we go. Pittman was dropped, trying to choose between him and Wicks. The number one waiver wire priority. I'm going to stick with Pittman there and save my waiver wire priority. What are you doing, Eric?
Yeah, I'm absolutely going Pittman in this route, right? I do think that there are brighter days ahead for him and for this Colts offense in general. whereas Wicks is a bit more contingent, right? Whether or not Watson misses extended time, whether or not Green Bay gives him a larger role, these are open questions, whereas we know what Pittman should be when this offense is working.
Josh Down or Wicks, if you had a choice right now, would this depend on your immediate need or is it a long-term need?
It would depend, but not to a point where it would actually change the way I would think about this. I would actually lean Wicks in this regard. I feel like it's going to be hard for Anthony Richardson to support Josh Downs for the duration of the year.
Man, all the Anthony Richardson hate is hurting my heart. Okay, this is an interesting question. Do you roster more than one defense in deeper leagues? When you do, you would maybe, if you didn't only had one, you would maybe be able to keep Mark Andrews.
This is the answer, right? This is the way. Follow us. Almost never, right? I can't remember the last time I did. I'm sure I have at some point, but a backup defense, a backup kicker, these are the roster cloggers that force you into difficult drop decisions that we don't like making.
No thoughts on Watson? I think this is a fair assessment. Watson probably is going to be less than 4 weeks, so I think this was a discussion about Pittman and Pittman versus Wicks, and I think that's an easy call. Wicks is an elite target earner, just in the raw still. Get him. Yeah, he got 5 of 13. That was a good start. League winner, especially when you look at the schedule. Like, I'm not against, anybody being a league winner at this point, but that's a pretty crowded receiving core for me to single out any one of them. Kraft, great comparative field at that position. I think right now that's the way it's been. Leighton, I love Kraft, regardless of Watson's help. Drop Diggs for Wicks.
Diggs, Stephon. No, thank
Diggs,
you. I'll happily roster Stephon Diggs there.
Yeah. Now starting Jaden Daniels. Should I drop Richardson for Fields? He's 0-4, I'm guessing this year. Sure. I mean, like, ideally you're going to be starting Jane Daniels every week, right? The issue with Justin Fields is, and I know there's maybe some people in the chat that don't believe that, I saw one that's saying, Flacco's 1 win away from being the starter. No, he's not. That's not happening. But I get it. But Fields seems like he has less long-term security to me. Is that how you feel about it, Eric? Or will you be willing to make that move to Fields with Daniels as your starter over Richardson?
Yeah, I would ideally not like to make this decision. I would look for another player to potentially drop to make it. If I'm backed into that corner, I would err on the side of Richardson, right? Your point is salient, Bob. I think his security in the role itself is much stronger. His ability to stay on the field, though, is another question. It seems like he's getting nicked up every time he's out there. So it's kind of a wash for me. I would say that Richardson has more upside on the whole of the season, so that'll be the tiebreaker I use to lean that way.
Yeah, I think, so I think on the teams, all the teams where I have 3 quarterbacks on the roster, and it's not ideal, I don't advocate for this, but there are all cases where I have either Richardson or one of those is I picked up a share of Justin Fields when it became apparent he'd be the starter, or I started drafting him like with the final pick in the draft, just on the off chance he would end up as a starter. And now I should probably trade him.
Trading is the answer. Go trade McDaniels.
Right. Not McDaniels. I'm keeping him. I love him. I'm trading Fields before he turns into a pumpkin. What is the role of What is the role of Pierce's role if Flacco starts? Do you see a big change there?
Not necessarily. Pierce has had a nice season so far. He's definitely outperformed most of the expectations we had out there. A lot of his blips on the fantasy radar have to do with Anthony Richardson throwing him these crazy bombs. And while Joe Flacco isn't afraid to uncork it to that extent, he doesn't exactly have the cannon that Anthony Richardson does. So maybe an incremental downtick for Pierce overall.
Yeah, ongoing discussions about the validity of Mark Andrews' take. Chase Brown is an interesting play. So, like, this is one of those things where it feels like, and I talked about this with Waldman too, like a lot of the things we think in May are the things that end up in November, right? Like, there's a little volatility early in the season. Like, all the talk all off season long was that Chase Brown was going to be the guy and that Zach Moss was the more complimentary piece. Now it seems like it had been the other way around. Now we have one game where they were both. It was a pretty even share, and it looked like maybe Chase Brown's gaining a little ground. How do you see this one playing out?
Yeah, I couldn't have put it better myself, right? You know, this week 4 sample in particular, where Chase Brown saw 42% of snaps and saw about 50% of the rushing work, is really where I thought this was going to get to when we were projecting the Cincinnati backfield. So, you know, yes, the arrow is pointing away to where it might look like Chase Brown is going to, you know, overtake the vast majority of this opportunity. I don't know if that's necessarily true. I think we kind of settle in to somewhere near this 50, you know, 50-50 split, 55-45 maybe. So I think we've kind of arrived at what the Cincinnati Bengals are most likely to do. But Chase Brown was a player that was frequently cut. So there's a non-zero chance he's out there on your wire, and he would be worth a speculative
For
add
sure.
in my
Absolutely.
measure.
In a desperate situation, how much fab would you spend on Trey Sermon or Ty Johnson?
I'm assuming you're in a desperate situation because you might not be with Jonathan Taylor. So if that's the case, I would probably push north of 15, even north of 18% on Trey Sermon.
That seems reasonable. And I saw a question asking how much we were talking about spending on Wicks. I think when we thought Watson was going to be out for an extended period, like at least on IR, maybe I was thinking maybe 20%. I'm thinking slightly less now. Where were you at on that?
That's about right. Yeah. When we were thinking IR, I actually wouldn't be shy to go north of 25%.
Right.
Now I'm a
Maybe
little
up
bit
to
closer
30.
to that like 18 to 20 range, depending on your league.
When you add Tua, and if you did, would you buy stock in Guardian Caps?
Yeah, I am actually one who is actively adding Tua because I have a league with a multitude of IR spots where I roster Anthony Richardson. So I'd like a little bit of backup there. If that is you, if you can add him to your IR spot, if you're not having to drop anyone of significance, I don't mind it.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you there. Here's the bigger picture, though. Dial up whoever has Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle in your leagues and see if you can't get those guys at a discount right now while
Certainly.
somebody's very unhappy with their production, maybe just tired and ready to throw in the towel, maybe ready to go all Mark Andrews and drop them or something crazy like that. But yes, definitely be looking at that because I think he will be coming back. Let's see what else we got going on there. By the way, if you're just now tuning in, many are. Eric Romoff here on the hot seat, doing a great job of holding down the fort and keeping me from doing too much crazy stuff. You can catch him at Fantasy Alarm, at In Between Media, Fade the Noise, Dr. Roto, here at times, there at times. A week from this Saturday, he'll be on my radio show, The Football Diehards, on Sirius XM, NFL and Fantasy Sports Radio on Saturday nights, weeknights, Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, 10 to midnight, Saturday, 8 to 11, Sunday, the pregame show from 11 to 1 p.m. Let's see what else we got here. We got more. We got more. I know. Mark Andrews talk. It's enough of
that. we really swatted a hornet's nest with this one.
I did, and I kind of did it on purpose, but I think part of it is so like this is the right point here, right? This is probably the right point. I'm not going to die on Mark Andrews Hill because it depends, but if you're on who you're dropping for him, that's the whole thing. I think I did a poor job of prefacing my comment, drop him, just to do the hot take. If you need a player who can contribute immediately to your team and you're in a dire straits, Mark Andrews is keeping you from getting that player, drop Mark Andrews. Otherwise, hold Mark Andrews and hope he returns to Mark Andrews.
A man is only as loyal as his options.
Exactly. Here we go. Raul wants to know, Mike Evans. So he has Evans, DK, Pittman, Rashid, Sutton. He's got Bijan, Rashad White, and Bucky Irving, Najee Harris, Charbonnet. Should I add a wide receiver named Wan'Dale Robinson, Wicks, Leggett, or a running back in Devontae Williams?
I guess it would depend on the number of each position that you're starting. I would probably look to speculate in the wide receiver market a little bit more, and I'd actually err on the side of Xavier Leggett here. Wan'Dale Robinson is certainly a bit safer, but I feel like you can get that kind of high floor productivity either in a flex spot or in your third wide receiver out of Shaheed or out of at least close to out of a waiver wire replacement level. Leggett could very much so step into a very, very nice upside role. But again, it's a 1 week sample size. So you're going to have him on your bench and see if that comes to fruition.
Mr. Nice Guy looking to sell high on Worthy and Dynasty. I'm not against that if you can sell high enough. We got that one on the Wicks. Wicks is greater than Downs unless Flacco is starting rest of season. That's not happening.
Yeah.
All right. Yes, Von Miller is gone, and that is at least 4 games. Some interesting. It's true. It's true. So here's the thing, though. Like, he comes out in this game and like has an encouraging start to the game. You're thinking, yeah, baby, we're getting on track. We'll finally get a good game out of him. And then like they put him in 2 plays later and ask him to do an RPO, and clearly he was not ready. The hip was still an issue. So yeah, that was very discouraging. But hey, like this was all built into the equation. And I think you guys everyone in this room knows this. Like when we discussed getting Richardson, mitigating the risk, having a backup plan in place, building a roster that's a little more robust at other positions or other spots where you're getting more consistent players. So there you go. Daniels makes everybody happy. Diggs is greater than Allen, but I'd sell high on Diggs. I don't know if I want to sell high on him. I think I think the Diggs Collins combo has turned Tank Dell into not a thing, right? 15% target shares in the game he's playing. I think that's a little bit of a concern.
Yeah, certainly. Tank Dell's era was kind of pointing in the right direction to an extent before he got hurt, but very clearly, he is the one that is coming off the field in multi-receiver sets, and he is the one who is most directly impacted by the addition of Steph Diggs.
Yeah, Moss has never been a thing until all of a sudden, it happened at Indy last year, and prior to that, and the team that drafted him was not interested in Buffalo, and he just didn't do much. But he looked very good last year in Indy, and I think he's looked okay. No, we talked about this a little earlier, Aled. It's fair to wait. It's probably responsible to wait, even if you think the worst case outcome. Got Goff and Purdy on the roster, but got Justin Fields, Geno on the waiver wire. What do you think? Who goes, if anybody, for one of those two?
Ooh, I would. I love turning my roster. I would probably let Goff go for Justin Fields. I think that we can see Purdy get back to shades of himself from last year, and the upside with Fields is real, right? Shout out to Arthur Smith, which are words that I never thought I would say out loud. He's done a nice job with them. He's putting them in a position to win. So we'll see if they can keep it going.
Probably Jalen right now that Jeff Wilson hurt his knee in warmups or something. I don't know. I didn't hear what happened there with that. We'll see if Mostert gets back soon. Probably not getting confirmation. And this is what we're hearing. It's going to be a week now. No, it's not normal. Not normal at all not to know this soon what's going on. I think they probably know the second opinion is taking time, and it may end up where we started, but we'll have to see. Oh, Lester, hi, nice to see you. And yes, Eric does get around. Everyone knows this. Pitts still startable. Can you drop Pitts?
Ooh, this is the same conversation we're having with Mark Andrews, right? It all depends on your alternatives. I do think that Pitt's underlying statistics are a little bit more favorable than those of Mark Andrews, but he has looked quite bad this year. Generally speaking, these underperforming top tier tight ends, as opposed to streaming at the position, are going to be the way that I err. I think that we see them get back to, even if it's just shades of themselves, I think that's far more likely than it is to get repeatable production streaming at the position.
I think this is the best tight end take all day. It's tight end. Just pray.
Yeah.
Just pray. It's
Jesus,
fair.
take the wheel.
This is brutal. I'm sorry, Dave. Yes, and yeah, wait. I mean, be responsible. I mean, whether he goes on IR or not, Andy Reid told us what was going on here when he said it's not good, and they're still waiting. That's fine. I don't think I'd set my expectations too high on him. Or let me ask you, Eric, what are you doing with 2 players that I think are interesting? Nick Chubb. So I've been Chubb skeptical all offseason. The vague language they've used at some point, but I don't think they'd open the window unless they thought he had a legitimate chance of returning. I don't think that necessarily locks him into return, but the fact that his practice window is opening before Jonathan Brooks is surprising to me, for one thing. But also we've got the CMC situation. So if you are sitting here right now and you could get a free pass at either of those two players, who do you want, CMC or Nick Chubb?
Ooh, I think I'll still go on the side of CMC, right? I am thinking that if I'm in that circumstance, I have made the requisite moves to where I can at least tread water while I wait for him. And, at their peak, you're certainly getting a much greater fantasy contributor in CMC than in whatever the unknown quantity of 2024 Nick Chubb is.
Yeah, I think this to me is really interesting. I don't think, I don't see any reason to force, Chubb back, but if you're the Browns, but San Francisco, they need to get on winning track here before I get too excited about that too. It would not surprise me if neither of them are legit contributors for our fantasy teams, and that the one who's going to the playoffs is saved for that portion of the year.
It is interesting that they open the window, right?
It is, and no Jonathan Brooks.
Creates a 21-day countdown clock where if he can't return, he's out for the year. So they at least believe that he is close enough to start that countdown clock, right?
Right. It was interesting because, and the Brooks comment is true. Brooks' delay is a bummer. It just seems a little bit interesting, that they said in August that he was three weeks away, and that was like a week before they put him on the list. And now it just seems interesting that they're not doing it. CMC is done. Mr. Nice Guy is not so very nice. Maybe done. It's possible. I mean, I'm not going to say that it's 100%. Like, I don't have a good feeling about him. I don't like to say anyone's done until they're done, unless it's Mark Andrews. Hello, Albert. But also, this is an interesting thing here that it brings up a notion to me. Not ready to bench either Pitts or Andrews yet. So we make a lot of decisions based on FOMO or just other fears. Like, we make a lot of decisions because, like, we keep playing players who aren't producing because we know the minute we bench them is going to be their big game. Sometimes that's what you have to do to get there. Ceremonial benching, the Mike Dempsey ceremonial benching, right? Like, get it out of their system, let them have the big game, then get them back into your rotation. But if you keep sitting there playing something that's not happening out of the fear that it's going to happen the minute you stop playing it, you're missing out on other points. So that to me is a bit of an issue. And that's the same thing about moving on from a player who's not, like, oh, they're going to score big on somebody else's roster. Well, or they're going to clog that other guy's roster the same way they're clogging yours.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing, right? Like if you're benching them ceremonially so they can receive a message and get their act together, that's one thing. If you're benching them because you have a viable alternative, that is where you're talking about a salient move, right?
Fair question. If we redrafted today, where would we take CMC? Not 101, lower.
Yeah. Under on the 0.05 draft pick. I mean, he'd probably be a mid to late round type of selection, right? He's got the name recognition to where people are still going to draft him. We saw this to a lesser extent with Nick Chubb, right? He was still going in that kind of like 8, 9, 10 round range.
Yeah,
I think
probably
that's probably where we would see CMC go.
Yeah, I think that's totally legit. All right, Eric, you survived the hot seat. Only some minor perspiration on the brow. I think you mopped it off nicely and hardly anyone noticed. I'm sweating more heavily for my Mark Andrews takes. Appreciate everyone coming around here. Again, I'll be here Saturday. I saw your lineup questions. 11 a.m. I do an hour of lineup questions all by myself. Just you, me, some friends. We'll sit around. We'll chop it up. We'll have a great time. In the meantime, you can catch me on Sirius, as I said, Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday at 10 to midnight. I got to do all the time zone translations in my head, and I'm not good at that. Saturday, you catch us from 8 to 11 on the NFL radio and the fantasy channel. On Sunday, you catch me on the pregame show with Jeff Mans from 11 to 1. And then all week long at Football Guys, every morning, the Football Guys Daily Update comes out in the wee hours of the morning and gets you up to speed on all the things you want to watch for throughout the day. Eric, what should people be looking for from you here?
Yeah, like I mentioned, all of my varied works and wares roll up into my Twitter page. That is @FantasyNav. If you simply cannot wait for more of all this, in about 90 minutes, I'll be live on the In Between Media YouTube channel talking more about waivers, going a little bit deeper, playing some games, having some fun. So generally speaking, I've been everywhere, man, and the best way to pin me down is @FantasyNav.
Yes, the creator of the Pros with Joe's, something I'm struggling with mightily. My my co-owner, I was supposed to lobby you so we could turn drop passes and blocks into points for Mark Andrews.
Oh, I think there's a larger conversation there about how we score the tight end position broadly.
I would rather add Freiermuth at the moment, but that's just me. And there was one other one that before we get out of here, Tutu or Robinson rest of the way. Robinson has a role when anyone comes back. I don't know that Tutu Atwell does. That fair?
I think that's the answer, right? While it will be diminished, he will still have that role if and when both of the starters return.
All right, we're out of here. Thanks, Eric. We'll see you guys Saturday. Come back here at 11 a.m. on this very channel. I'll be here to answer all your questions, lineups, and whatnot. Get it all. I'm Bob Harris. He's Eric Romoff. We're signing off.